Hello, students. Welcome to Pedagondia Faunas School. You have read the title. We all know why class is in session. We are talking about Kano, and why Kano is very, very good, but it's still the worst apex carnivore at the moment. Let's jump straight into it. First off, we're going to go over the differences between Kanu and Sutrolar because people seem to just think that Kanu is a lot worse than Sutrolar in like basically every way. So, starting off, Kanu has better DPS. Its attack rate is very, very fast. The damage output, in my opinion, or not in my opinion, it just is better or the best of the three apexes, despite having less damage than Aizu and Sega. Kanu's attack rate is nuts, and as a result, its DPS is just the highest. It's goated with the sauce. Kanu is very fast, tied fastest apex with Sega. It takes less time to grow than Sutrolar as well, with Sucha taking 72 and Kanu taking 60 minutes. Um, yeah, Kanu's not just different or just a worse version of Sucholar, even though its stats might look like that. Going into Sucha, Sucha is tankier. Obviously, Sucha is a semi-aquatic, which makes it more versatile. Its attack rate is obviously slower. It's got worse hitboxes than Kanu. Kanu's Kanu's got less food and less food than Sucholar, while Sucholar has less water. So, and Sucha also has more stamina, since its stamina was shadow buffed from 35 to 60. So they're not just interchangeable, they fill different roles as well, whereas Sucha's mostly going to just be your tanky little brawl dude. Kanu's just gonna be your like epic gamer, do as much damage as you can in as little time as possible, and Kanu does very, very well at that. Kanu's, as you can understand so far, Kanu's pretty epic. It's got some really unique attributes for it having just the best DPS of any Apex. Its mouse 1 and AoE hitboxes are both very, very good. It's a lot tankier than Sega, but it's still the worst Apex, and the reason why is here, or actually, let me just put up Kanu's cons. It's got low food and water, so in a long 1v1, you can starve it and dehydrate it relatively easily, especially if you're able to consistently keep the Kanu in combat and prevent it from menuing. It's got the second lowest stam of any Apex, only having 5 more than Aizu. Um, it's still the second frailest Apex despite being tanky, with Sucha and Aizu obviously being more tanky than it. Sucha's versatility is a lot more impactful majority of the time because let's say you're in a situation or where head-on combat is going to be something that might happen, but you also might still need to escape that. With Sucha, you have a lot more options to escape than with Kano. With Kano, you just kind of have to run away, especially in a 1v1. That makes Sucha's versatility a lot more beneficial and impactful than Kanu's DPS, because yes, you might win that or 1v1 depending on what you're up against, but you also still might lose. And if you're going to lose, with Sucha you have more options to escape, whereas with Kanu, as I said, you can only run away. Kanu's pros outweigh its cons quite a decent bit, in my opinion. Um, as you can read, it's got the best DPS of any Apex. It's tied fastest Apex with Sega. Obviously, its AoE and its mouse 1 are very good. Um, it's one of its cons cannot be argued as a pro because it's easy to keep fed and watered. You don't have to worry about that a lot. Just it's like super easy to keep yourself topped up if you really need to. You hard counter one of the best creatures in the game in Sega. Yes, a Sega can beat you in a 1v1. Yes, a skilled Sega obviously is going to have or potentially like trade you, but you still a majority of the time are going to hard counter Sega. Fuck. Let me try that again. On paper, you hard counter Sega, and obviously, Sega's one of the best creatures in the game right now. Kano being able to do that is a giant benefit. And like all the Apexes, you're able to 1v1 any creature if you're good enough. But that's just kind of a default for the Apexes, to be honest. But it's got 4 big, difficult matchups for it, and we'll get into those in a sec. Kanu only has really 4 bad matchups for it, and those 4 bad matchups are Mammoth or Stoma, Dab, Aizu, and Sutrolar. Now, Sutrolar's not as bad as a matchup as the other ones, and like I said, you can basically 1v1 all of them if you're good enough, but these matchups are not in your favor. Sega or Sutra is just kind of tanky. You can potentially out DPS it if there's a level difference or you're just better, and you're able to impose your DPS better than it can impose its tankiness. As for Aizu, dude, Aizu is very difficult because of its area denial capabilities. Getting in to execute your DPS on it is very, very difficult. Dab's obviously fucking got a ton of bleed. 2 bleed per AoE is obviously a big thing. It can one-shot combo you and almost kill you. Mammoth has got a good range with its mouse 1, and a good hitbox in general with its mouse 1, and its AoE is obviously very good, and statistically the best creature in the entire game. But that being said, Kanu's good matchups are very, very in its favor. Its bad ones are very much against Kanu, other than Sucha, but its good ones like Volcar, Grak, Trike, Sega, Goro, like these are all matchups very, very good, like or very, very in Kanu's favor. You're gonna be able to fuck these guys up pretty easily for the most part. The only ones that are going to really give you any problems are potentially Grak, Sega, and Trike. Because Grak's just Grak, it's tanky as fuck. At high levels, it's very, very tanky. Its ability's pretty strong. But you should be able to impose your DPS on it pretty easily. Because no one's pro with Grak. Like, let's be real. And on paper, your DPS just mauls it. Sega and Trike, you just have to man, I really can't fucking speak for this one, huh? You just have to watch for the bleed. That's kind of just it. But majority of the time, you're just gonna be able to fucking walk through them and just out DPS anything they can throw at you. Once you run out of stam against these guys, it can be kind of difficult, and you have to be pretty good at reserving your stamina. But other than that, you're just going to be able to walk through them for the most part. As we've established, Kanu is obviously very, very good as it is right now. In my opinion, it's kind of interchangeable with Sutrolar for worst Apex. But yeah, that's probably going to change when it gets its firebreath. And obviously the rest of this video is going to be speculation from here on out. But yeah, we're going to be going over how I think Kanu's Fire Breath will change it as a creature. And just to be clear, Kanu's stats will likely be nerfed to an extent to compensate for it having a ranged ability, and presumably a very powerful one at that. So yeah. With Kanu's stats going to be changing, I assume that its attack rate will obviously go down, and it will probably become more frail. However, I think that its matchups will likely change pretty significantly, and I think that its matchups against Dab, Aizu, Sucha, and Mammoth will all become more so in its favor than not. I think that its stats will obviously still be decent, given that it is an Apex, but giving it just that extra layer of versatility in its Fire Breath, making it so that it doesn't have to just melee or space with its melees, and it will now be able to just spew out fire, obviously it will depend on how good the fire actually is, but I think that regardless of how good it is, it will become a lot better against Dab and Aizu and Mammoth specifically. Against Sutra, we'll have to wait and see. But if Kanu keeps its pretty good speed, or not pretty good speed, it's very good speed, it will probably be able to just space Sutra down with its fire breath, and obviously that's a very good thing. I think that unlike Volcar, Kanu's large size and presumably pretty good stats will make it very, very difficult to rush it down with things like Rat or Pharaohhound or Krask, given Krask can trade Volcar. Actually, that might not be true anymore. It was before. It might not be now. But it'll probably make it a lot more difficult for lower tiers to deal with, or not a lot more difficult, but it'll make it more difficult than Volcar to deal with for basically everything, and it won't have strict counters like Volcar does. Volcar's strict counters right now are things that can run it down and beat its ass up. I don't think Kano will have that as much. I think it will probably end up still having counters, but I think that it won't be like Volcar, where basically anything that can run it down and start beating it up will beat it. I think that Kanu will probably just be not a better Volcar because its fire breath will be relatively close to medium range. But I think that they'll both be very good at busting down the tanks of the game, with Kanu potentially being the worst of the two. I don't know. We'll probably have to wait and see, because in my mind, the way that Kanu's fire breath will work is that it'll just spew it out in front of it, and it'll do, like, let's say 30 damage per tick, like how Rat's poison gas works. If that's the case, it'll be very, very good for busting down tanks. So, yeah. This is the end. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Pedagondia Faunas School. Let me know what you guys think Kanu's fire breath will be like in the description. Goodbye, and class is now dismissed.